not being reasonable. Don't change the claim. You have arguments for and against the claim, but don't change it. That's my response. It's not an answer, it's a response. Here we go. Formation of granite. Now, if the background to this is the idea that if there is no God in existence, then the processes that formed what we now know as the earth took millions and hundreds of millions of years. If there was a God, then there is a possibility that the God could do what is known as creation and snap his fingers and it'll happen, boom, just right there. The formation of granite. We know how sedimentary rocks are formed, layer upon layer of sand, and then over a period of time they get compressed and form rock. We know how igneous rock is formed. It's lava that becomes rock later on. We do not know how granite is formed. There's only a theory. And in that theory, the material which was gaseous in stage coalesced or got together, and under a certain pressure and temperature became granite. But that is a theory. Granite has never ever been formed by those pressures and temperatures and material. Never. But here's what we have so far. There is something known as polonium halos. Now what's polonium? Polonium-218 is a radioisotope. What's a radioisotope? A material that gives off radiation. And any material that gives off radiation decays or becomes smaller in quantity itself. It'll give off the radiation and then become smaller. So when you look at the mass of some radioactive substance, we talk about half-lives. In other words, how much time does it take to become half its size? Uranium-238 has a half-life of 4.53 billion years. So if there's a very little piece of uranium here, it will take 4.53 billion years for that material to become half its size. Polonium-218 is what is known as a primordial radioisotope. In other words, there is no material from which it came. Most of the others, when it decays or becomes or gives off its radiation, becomes something else, like uranium, then becomes radon, radium, and then finally it goes on to lead. Lead stops because it's not a radioactive isotope. Polonium-218 is a radioisotope that is primordial. It doesn't have a previous precursor or something that it came from. Polonium-218 has a half-life of 3 minutes. So it stays for 3 minutes and half-life and becomes half. If you pull it to its full life, it's about 5 hours. People talk about half-lives as the life. So we'll leave it at 3 minutes, but you can use 5 hours too. It has a half-life of 5 hours. Now, suppose there's a bubble that is caught in a block of ice. The bubble lasts for only 5 hours. How long do you think then that we should say it took for the ice to form? At least 5 hours, not more than that. If it took more than that, the bubble is gone. Are you with me? I'll say that again. If a bubble is going to last for only 5 hours and then it's gone, and we do find a bubble in a block of ice, then we can reasonably deduce that that ice caught the bubble in a period of 5 hours. Because if it took longer than that, the bubble is gone. Polonium-218 has a half-life of 3 minutes to 5 hours, a full life of 5 hours. When it decays, it gives off radiation. And when it's in a substance, the radiation causes what is known as a signature halo. It forms a halo around in the substance itself as it gives off the radiation. So if a material has caught a halo, then the material was formed between 3 minutes and 5 hours. Is that reasonable? Yes, that's what the reasoning is. Polonium halos, an exceedingly large number of polonium halos are embedded in granites around the world. including in Yosemite, where I've gone to those huge, gigantic granite rocks. Every granite rock that they have tested around the world has polonium halos embedded in huge quantities. It's an astounding conclusion. Granite was formed not in hundreds of millions of years, but within 3 minutes to 5 hours. Yeah, you've got to say, wow. I met the author who really did this research himself a few months ago in Maryland, USA. And I went up to him and I said, has anybody refuted what you have published as in scientific journals? And this is what he said. We have repeatedly challenged the academy to publicly explain whether polonium halo evidence for creation has ever been scientifically invalidated. For over 15 years, they have refused to even try. It's quite an amazing piece of information from the scientific world. And it's been there for 15 years now. And I asked him, has anyone refuted? He said, not to this day. Till that time, I think scientifically, if you're a scientist, and if I'm a scientist, searching for knowledge, an inquirer is a scientist, then we have to agree, or at least give some credence to it and say, it is possible that granite, and granite is supposed to be the framework of planet Earth. The frame of planet Earth was formed within 3 minutes to 5 hours. Statistical analysis. Chance is a subjective concept, but it is also a mathematical formula. It is called probability. What are the chances that this will happen? Okay, you put all the factors into the formula, and then the formula churns out a number, and it's 1 to so and so. In day-to-day life, 10 to the power of 8, which is 100 million, if something is going to occur 100 million times, and it probably will not occur only once, then in day-to-day life we say it's a fact. If it occurs only once, and will not occur 10 to the power of 8 times, that is 100 million times, then we say it's not possible. This is day-to-day life. When it comes to scientific evaluation, the number goes up to 10 to the power of 15 or 1 quadrillion. If you want to build a drawbridge or shoot a rocket into space carrying people, or make a roller coaster, then the principles that you use for building those things have to go to a point of 10 to the power of 15. In other words, the principle must sustain itself 10 to the power of 15 times and chances, and be probably not there one chance, and only then they will use that principle, because life is at stake. So 10 to the power of 15 is the point at which they say this is a good scientific plan or a good scientific concept. When it comes to scientific law, the number goes up to 10 to the power of 50. 10, 1 followed by 50 zeros. So if something is going to occur 10 to the power of 50 times and will not occur only one time, then we say it is a law, scientific law. And if it occurs only once, only one chance, and it will not occur 10 to the power of 50 times, we say it is utterly impossible. It's a scientific law that it will not occur. Michael Denton was one of the first, arguably, one of the first to challenge Charles Darwin's theory based on statistical chance. What he did was looked at the first cell that probably occurred and came together, and asked, what are the chances that some components of the cell came together to the same place by themselves? Because that's the claim. It's spontaneous generation, they call it. By themselves, the material came together. Now, we want the cell to live. So we look at what is the minimum number of proteins that require a cell to live, and that is 100. What are the chances that they came together? Before that, this number 10 to the power of 50 actually flies over our heads. So let me give you one idea of where we are with that number. Suppose I want to test gravity with my pointer. Once a second, I am dropping this, hoping that I'll get to that one chance when the pointer will not fall down like that because of gravity, but will stay right there or float away. I'm looking for that chance. So once per second, I'm testing gravity. If we test it 10 to the power of 18 times, not 10 to the power of 50, 10 to the power of 18 times, it'll take me 15 billion years. To test it 10 to the power of 20 times, it will take me 1.5 trillion years. What is the significance of the first one, 10 to the power of 18 seconds, 15 billion years? That is the age of the universe, from the Big Bang. The entire age of the universe is only 10 to the power of 18 seconds, 10 to the power of 18 times. I've still got to go to 10 to the power of 50. 10 to the power of 20 is 100 times the age of the universe. All we are trying to portray here is 10 to the power of 50 is a humongous number. It is arbitrary, but you cannot question it because it is so big. Are you with me? All right, 10 to the power of 50 is a big number. So big you cannot question it. And that is why it is a law, a scientific law. Now, when Michael Denton looked at those, he realized that, and did his studies, it requires 100 proteins to inside one cell to keep it alive. So what are the chances that 100 proteins came together by themselves? It would give a maximum combined probability of 10 to the power of minus 2000, or one chance in 10 to the power of 2000. There's another guy who looked at just not the proteins. Proteins are made up of amino acids. Those are building blocks. So the 100 proteins will require 10,000 amino acids. And peculiarly, the amino acids have right-sided links or left-sided links. In scientific terms, they are called levo or dextro. Left-sided or right-sided links. In nature, we find what is known as racemic mixtures of amino acids. Racemic mixtures means there is equal part of right-handed and left-handed. And no known process, we know of no known process by which we can change that ratio. And yet inside the cell, all the 10,000 amino acids are only left-handed. Same thing with nucleotides, which are the building blocks for the chromosomes inside the nucleus. We need 100,000 nucleotides, and inside the cell, all 100,000 nucleotides have to be only right-handed nucleotides. Otherwise, they won't even link together. What are the chances that these things can come together at the same place, same time, at a spot that is about 2,500 times smaller than the dot at the end of a sentence in a book? The chances are 10 to the power of 33,113. There was Harold Morowitz. He said, let's look at the whole cell, not just the nucleotides. The nuclear membrane, the cytoplasm, the nucleus, the mitochondria, the Golgi apparatus, everything that you can possibly think of. And let us ask ourselves mathematically, what are the chances that one cell, just the material in the one cell could come together? This is his number, 10 to the power of 100 billion. And this is just to bring the material together. Now that material that has come together must somehow become alive. That is not in these chances. And every molecule in that cell must know what to do. And then that cell must know exactly how to divide so that when it becomes two cells, both the cells are exactly like the parent cell, and both are alive. And then those two have to become more complex, 100 cells and 1,000,000 cells, and then you get plant life, and then animal life, and finally humans like you and me, and then somehow into that complex organism must be injected abstract qualities like love and courage and appreciation for beauty. Are you with me? That list itself is endless. If the list is endless, what are the chances? Statistically, an utter, complete impossibility. So by numbers, the statistical analysis says that the event was much better explained as a supervised event rather than as a random event that occurred by itself. The universe is unlikely, very unlikely, deeply, shockingly unlikely. That's from Discover. So what caused it? What did they say? So if it is so unlikely, how did it happen? Here's a book called A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson. It's read all over the world, and this is their explanation. So what caused the whole universe? To begin with, some quality or thing, we don't know which one it is, quality or thing, that introduced a measure of instability into the nothingness that was. To me, that's not a scientific explanation. First of all, you do not know whether it's a quality or thing. You're just guessing then. Secondly, how can you say there was a quality or thing because there was nothing? Yes, it is a very difficult proposition to sustain an argument there. And how did life start then? It was a singularly hostile environment, and yet somehow life got going. Somehow. It's a scientific explanation. Somehow life got going. Some tiny bag of chemicals twitched and became animate. We were on our way. These are in layman's terms. But no matter what the scientific terms are, the basic explanation are only these. There is no other explanation. You have to say, somehow, I don't know how, but it happened. But I don't want to ever say that there was a creator. It happened by itself. The difficulties of belief may be great. The absurdities of unbelief are greater. Because you cannot find an explanation while pretending or stating that you have an explanation. Because science requires that, an explanation. And so if you give a whole big explanation and finally say, I don't have an explanation, it really is not scientific. And it's absurd for the simple reason that if it is so unlikely, like we saw the Discover statement, is so unlikely, then we can almost call it magic. So here is the proposition. The persons who believe that it is a supervised event will tell you that the magic occurred because a magician performed it. And the people on the other side will say, how naive. How can you ever think of that? Magic? By a magician? Come over to my side. My side is magic without even the magician. It becomes absurd. It does. So why do they want to run away or move away from that? Why would you not want to go there? I really don't know, but there are some statements that they have said. Why should God rule and I serve? I don't want there to be a God who would hold me responsible for my immoral lifestyle. That's least trouble as an atheist. For a fruitful public debate, we need to understand evolution's foundation. We need to understand this because ultimately evolution is not about scientific details. Ultimately evolution is about God. This is a very big statement. And it can be challenged. And I would like you to challenge it and go ahead and see if that statement makes any sense. Because if it is scientific evaluation and scientific details, then I think the first thing we must stand up and say, well, statistically it's impossible. Number one. Spontaneous generation, this is George Wald. I think he was a Nobel laureate, Nobel Prize winning scientist. Way back in 1954, this is what he said: spontaneous generation, meaning by itself, was disproved 100 years ago, but that leads us to only one other conclusion, that of supernatural creation. We cannot accept that on scientific grounds? No, we cannot accept that on philosophical grounds. And therefore we choose to believe the impossible, that life arose spontaneously by chance. It is a choice, and everybody is free to make their choice. And that we agree, and we accept, and we give way to. You're free to choose, but you're not free to say that it is scientifically based, because it is not scientifically based. The correct scientific basis would say there is a chance that it is a supervised event. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the universe to be like that. That's a philosophical statement. But it's not scientific. It has to be a philosophical statement. So, the conclusion, origin of life by random chance is utterly impossible statistically. The only alternative is supernatural creation by design. There is intelligent design all around us. There must be a creator in existence. This creator should be called God. You don't have to call God, because I remember describing this in front of a university group, and they said, why do you want to call God? I don't like that word. I said, fine. And I think it should be fine if you don't want to use the word God. So I said, well, what would you like to use word? Which word would you like to use? And he said, didn't think about that, but let me see. Why don't we call that a leaf or a twig? I said, that's fine, as long as you remember that the leaf and the twig knows more than you. Because that is the characteristics we have. You don't change the characteristics, you can change the name. Give any name you want. So I will throw that out to you too. Give any name you want. If I call him God, don't fight with me. If you want to call that leaf or a twig, go ahead. But the characteristics are awesome power, giant intellect. That's what we saw. Pan process of the 4 columns, that is how I did that initial part of my search. You don't have to take it. Do your own. But make all 4 columns and see how it pans out for you. For me, obviously, the swing of the pendulum was decisively to the side, that if I was to use reason, information, and logic, I would have to agree that there was something known as a supernatural beyond what we see. Now those numbers, just a little bit of statistics on those, or the response or the consideration of those numbers. Once you reach a place of, 1 is to 10 to the power of 100 billion, then we are talking about impossible versus possible. So here's the logic. If there are 2 options, only 2, and one of them is right, which in this case has to be, there is a God, there is no God, the only 2 options, then if A is possible, so is B. If A becomes improbable, B becomes probable. If A becomes impossible, B becomes fact. Say that again. If there are only 2 possibilities, only one of which is right, then if A is possible, so is B. If A becomes improbable, B becomes probable. If A becomes impossible, B becomes fact. I'll give you a real life example. We'll do a math test here. Square root. Is the square root of a number bigger or smaller than the number? Maths. The square root is always smaller. The square root of 9 is 3. 3 squared is 9. All right? So here's the test. I'm going to throw out a test. Don't answer until I ask you. What is the square root of 25? Don't answer. There are only 2 options I am going to give you. Only one of them is correct. You got it? I'm asking for what is the square root of 25. And I'm going to give you 2 options, and only 2, and only one of them is correct. A is 33. B, I'm not even going to tell you. Which would you choose? B. Yes. Why? You didn't see it. I didn't even write it down for you. Why would you choose B? Because A is impossible. The square root of a number can never be bigger than the number. So the square root of 25 cannot be 33. You don't even have to see B and visualize it even to choose B. As long as A is impossible, B is fact. With me? When statistically the chances are 1 is to 10 to the power of 100 billion, then that becomes impossible, because 1 is to 10 to the power of 50 itself is impossible by scientific law. Then if that is impossible, the other option becomes fact. You don't even have to see it. So we analyze this as closely as possible. And like I said, for me it was clear that the pendulum was swinging to one side. I had no option but to accept there was something beyond our existence that possibly had a tremendous intellect and also tremendous power.